everyone, it's Kris from my girlfriend's quilt shop, and I am so thrilled to be able to present a brand new mini quilt for you this month. And we are talking the May mini quilt from Kimberbell Designs. This one is just as cute as can be, and boy, does it get us ready for summer, doesn't it? Let's take a closer look. First of all, you're going to see these bright, beautiful colors, and with them corresponds some really cute appliques. For example, take a look at this butterfly. Isn't that beautiful? We're going to use a little bit of mylar in there to accent those wings. And then, of course, those big, beautiful hibiscus flowers are sure a lot of fun. Now, the real feature on this quilt, I believe, is this vase. I love this quilt block because we're featuring this beautiful vase that has a little bit of shine to it thanks to adding a little bit of vinyl over top. That clear vinyl really accents that base. And then the real winner here are the flowers. Wouldn't you agree? Now, these flowers are showcasing the technique of being able to do fringe applique, which is a lot of fun. And the MVP when it comes to doing these flowers really is the water-soluble thread. We're going to use water-soluble thread in our bobbin, which is going to really help us to be able to take this to the finish line. It's so sweet and really dainty and a really fun technique to learn, and I can't wait for us to do it together. We also have the sentiment blocks that say, "You are as welcome as the flowers in May," which is a nice little ring to spring. And then we have a lot of background quilting that is happening with the additional blocks in this mini quilt. So lots of fun techniques to learn today. I'm excited. Let's go ahead and begin. So first off, let's talk about the cutting for just a moment. Now, in today's video, I'm actually not going to go through the cutting, but let me refer you to the instructions that you're going to find in your manual. All right, so let's take a look at this. Right here, I've gone ahead and printed out my instructions. I just love to have them printed out, put in a 3-ring binder. It makes it real easy, but you can view them on your computer as well. And you're going to see the different thread colors that they recommend. But right here is the materials needed, and you're going to see each of the swatches of fabric and what their purpose is and the size that you want them to be cut at. Now, something to definitely make note of is what is here in blue. This is something that is fairly new to Kimberbell. They haven't done this with all of their projects, but I love seeing that they're doing this now. That if you are doing block by block quilting, then especially on these 4 blocks, which are the filler blocks, you'll want to cut them a little bit larger. So again, normally we would cut that filler block to be 2.5 by 2.5. This time around, they're saying, let's do it 3 by 3. Gives you a little more wiggle room when doing the block by block. So just pay close attention to that. And then you also have the cutting diagrams for the fabric, which is really helpful. And if you'd like to see a video on how this is done, I want you to refer back to our January mini quilt or even our February mini quilt, where I go more step by step with you on video on how to read these diagrams and then how to cut your blocks. You'll find that to be very helpful. All right, so once you have all of your fabric cut out and your embellishments, it's time to move forward. You're going to see that the first steps are with the sentiment blocks, and I want to show you here that I have already stitched these out. These are easy peasy. You're going to be able to do these really quickly. And there's not really a whole lot to know about them. Just follow again, step by step on how it's done. You're going to do background quilting first. You're going to lay your sentiment on top, and all it is thread. So very, very simple to do. Now, as we've done in previous videos, we'll regularly take background quilting. We'll put it in the machine. We'll bring it up first, and then we take the applique and we place it on top, and we're good to go, right? This time, it changes just a little bit, ever so slightly, but really important to make a big note in your instructions. So let's take a look at my instructions. I'm working on page 8 right now. And I want you to take a close look at option 1. And again, this is for those of you who are doing background quilting. It tells us that we're going to use KDQ 251 Spring 4 with the 6x8 design. And you can see here that there is a special alignment. Underline this, star it if you need to, big arrows, whatever you need to do to say, okay, I'm going to take this step by step because Kris reminded me that these are special instructions here, right? Again, we normally do center the embroidery file horizontally over the quilting file. And yeah, we're good there, right? This is what we normally do. But this is where it changes a little bit. Then move the embroidery file downward until the bottom edges of both files are aligned. And it even has a little diagram here for us to follow. Again, making sure that we bring on the background quilting and we bring on the vase applique. But before we begin stitching anything out, we do need to move that vase down just about another inch or so until those lines at the bottom match up. Okay, so let's head over to the machine and take a closer look at exactly what I'm talking about, and then we can go ahead and get started with the regular applique. I want to first find my background quilting, and that is KDQ 251. Here we go. And I am looking for the 6x8 design. I'll go ahead and hit set. And I don't want to embroider quite yet because I need to bring on the applique, right? So hold tight there. I'm going to go ahead and hit the word add. From here, let me bring up my designs again. And I'm now going to find the vase. And here we go, KD 5130 5x7 vase. And I'll hit set. And again, this is where I normally would be like, woohoo, I'm ready to go, but not quite yet. Because remember, these are some special instructions on this particular block. So what it asked us to do was to move that design file down for both of those designs to line up along the bottom. All right, so how do we do that? Well, first of all, we don't want to hit embroidery quite yet. Instead, I'm going to hit edit, move, and I'm going to use my arrow keys to bring it down. And if I need to bring it back up a little bit because I've gone too far, I can do that. And there we go. It looks like it's pretty perfectly aligned right there. Can you see that the bottom edge of my vase is even with the bottom edge of my background quilting? So make sure you do that, and then we can hit OK and embroidery. Now to place our batting, making sure that all of the outside lines have been covered. Now that my batting has been tacked down, I can simply remove the hoop from the machine and bring it carefully over to my cutting station to cut the excess batting away. I'm going to use the Kimberbell scissors to be able to help me cut this out. And on this one, I'm going to use my duckbill scissors, and the duckbill always stays towards the applique. What's going to take place now is that the machine will do a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way outside of my batting stitches. And then that tells me that I need to make sure this next piece goes directly over top of that. Now, one of the reasons why we have that outside edge stitch is because the beauty of block by block quilting is that you do not have batting in those seam allowances, which helps to make your project nice and flat. So Kimberbell thinks of everything, and we're so grateful that they have thought to not have batting in our seam allowances. All right, let's head back to the machine then, and we'll go ahead and do the placement outline. We'll place our background on top. Make sure that your background has the fusible backing on the back. That will make sure that, it helps prevent puckering, gives a little more stability to your fabric as well. And then after that, it's going to do the tack down stitch to hold it in place. Right? There we go. Shooting stars. All right, let's take a look at the screen in front of us, and you're going to see that my next step is that awesome background quilting. It's so, so cute. Love it. This is my favorite part. So I am going to switch my thread colors out because I really don't want this dark green on there. And remember to always trim at the top, pull through the needle. Get in the habit of that. That will help save some life on your machine. We never want to have thread coming backwards through the tension discs. So just a little tip there. And I'll use my never miss needle threader to thread this. So in the instruction book, it does recommend the color white. But again, remember, those are just suggestions. When we look at thread colors, it really is ultimately up to you. So on mine, I've chosen to use a little bit darker gold color just to show up a little bit better, but not take away from the darling vase design. So I want it subtle, but I still want it to show up a little bit. So that's why I've opted not to go with white thread. Again, it's completely up to you. So I just finished doing my background quilting on this block, and I want to pay, again, really close attention to the instructions that are outlined here. Let's take a look. On page 8, it says here to refer to the applique blocks. Design and alignment information are listed above, which is what we just finished. But this is an important instruction as well. After quilting, go to machine step 3 in the embroidery instructions. That means we don't have to stitch out tick marks and we don't have to stitch out any of the basting stitches. We can skip right over to stitch 3. Stitch the foliage 1 fill. So now I can just move on to go ahead and do my green threads. I'm going to be using 3 different green threads on the foliage, and there you have it. So again, just pay really close attention to the instructions that are found in option 1 of block by block quilting. If you will do those things, you won't go astray. Now that our foliage has been stitched out, it's time to start on those fringe flowers. The first thing it's going to do is create these small circles, which are placement lines, for where I'm going to place my gold fabric, which become the centers of the flowers. So let's go to that point, and then we'll move to the next step. So as you can see here, I've gone ahead and trimmed the excess fabric away from these yellow centers. And now it's time to start creating the fringe. So the first round of fringe, I'm actually going to use this deep plum color. That's going to be in the top. However, in the bobbin is going to be water soluble thread. Now, if you don't have water soluble thread, it's certainly okay to use a different thread, as long as it's a different color from the top. You want to make sure and have these be different colors so that it's much easier to trim those bobbin threads underneath after the stitch out has been completed. But I'll tell you, an even easier way to do fringe is to be able to use water soluble bobbin. Now, a couple things to note about that. First of all, take a look at what I did here. I actually took a Sharpie marker and colored over top. This is my signal to say beep, 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 right? I don't want to have this be confused with regular bobbin thread. That could present a nightmare, as you can imagine. So I want to make sure and note that this is a different thread. I better pay attention to what I'm using. So that's the first thing, because this will wash away. The second thing that you need to know when it comes to water soluble thread is to keep it in a small bag, if you will, something that is reusable, that can close up, because we don't want the outside moisture to get to it, and it can also dry up and become brittle. So just a couple things to note about that. Now, pay very close attention. Let's take a look at these instructions found on page 9. because it tells us in yellow to change the bobbin thread to a water-soluble thread or a visible color, like I mentioned. And the next step is going to stitch the flowers one fringe, and the step after that is going to stitch the flowers two fringe. Then, after those have both been done, we'll go ahead and change the bobbin thread back to a neutral color. So for example, that's where I usually am using white in my bobbin, correct? And then from there, I'm going to stitch the flower center outlines. So those are the steps that it takes in order to create fringe. Again, right now, I'm using water soluble in the bobbin. I'm using a pretty plum in the top. I'll switch out just the top to do the flowers too, keeping the water soluble in place. And then finally, when it comes to doing my gold center, I will go back to a regular thread, making sure to take this out of my bobbin. All right, let's go ahead and do that. First thing is taking out my regular thread and placing in my water soluble. So our fringe flowers have now stitched out, but there's one thing we need to do before we move on to the next step. Do you remember what it is? If you guessed moving out that water-soluble thread in your bobbin, you are correct. Don't forget to do that. So I'm telling myself the same thing right now. I don't want to forget that. So I'll remove this bobbin and I'm going to replace it with this one. This is my regular bobbin thread. Nothing's going to wash away with this one. And then I'll go ahead and put my hoop back into the machine and I'll switch out my thread color. Remember, cutting at the top, pulling it through the bobbin, bottom, and I'm going to switch it out for yellow. So my flowers are officially done stitching out, and now it's time to be able to add the ribbon. Now I'm going to switch the thread color out just to a darker color so that it's easier to see. However, you can keep the same thread color that you have in originally and not have to change it. But I'm going to switch out for a darker one, and it's going to stitch out a couple of different placement lines for where to place our ribbon. That's right, the ribbon is added now, and we don't have to wait until after the entire quilt is completed to add the ribbon. So here we are. I have a dark thread color in, and it's going to make two little markings. With those two markings in place, I'm now ready to take my purple ribbon, and I'm just going to kind of center it just right along there. And I'll take a piece of Kimberbell paper tape and just place it right there in the center, and then two more pieces to be on each side. Now I'll take it back to the machine and it's going to stitch the ribbon in place. Once it's done that, I'll go ahead and remove the center tape, but I'll keep my side pieces intact right there. Up next, the thread is going to stitch the outline for where to place my vase fabric. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and place my fabric over top of that, and we're going to treat this just like a normal applique. Our final step is to add the vinyl, the clear vinyl. And so what I'm going to do is just simply place this piece over top of the vase, and it's going to do one final stitch. Now remember, this is a raw edge applique, so you want to make sure and use the same thread color that you did before. There's no need to change. And then we'll have the final step out. Let's do it. All right, we're finished stitching. So now it's time to go ahead and remove the excess vinyl away from the vase. So we'll trim that up. And then I'm going to talk to you about how to fringe the flowers. This is where water-soluble bobbin thread really comes to play. And then we're going to finally trim up the block. All right, so let's take a look down here. The first thing I'm going to do is remove the tape that was holding the ribbon that was stitched into place. Then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to trim close to that stitch line. Make sure that when you do this, you don't accidentally cut your ribbon. You'll be so sad, right? Okay, go this way. Just a little trim all the way around the vase. Whoops, almost caught myself there cutting that ribbon. Don't want to do that. But if you did, would it be the end of the world? No. We could figure it out, right? Just do things a little different. But there we go. Looks pretty good. If you need to trim up a little bit more, you can definitely do that. Okay, so that is all stitched down, cut out. This is the fun part. I get to tie a little purple ribbon bow right here. All right, that looks good. Now, how do we make these flowers fringe? Well, what I'm going to do is simply turn this over to the back side. You could pop it out of the hoop if you wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and keep it in there for now. I'm going to take my spray bottle. This is a misting spray bottle that we have here at my girlfriend's quilt shop. I absolutely love it, and I have it filled with water. So what I'm going to do here is just spray the back of these flowers. And that's going to get the bobbin thread wet, which again was water soluble. And then I'm going to just take my fingernail and just kind of rough up those edges a little bit. Okay. So what's going to happen here? Oh yeah, I can see it already starting. I love that. What's going to happen is that this bobbin thread is actually going to dissolve. And this is what makes it so simple to pull up the threads from the front. This next part is what is the most fun. I'm going to flip this over. And now it's time to pull out our threads. And I know if you've never done this before, it's going to seem a little scary to you, right? You see how these little threads are popping out? This is absolutely adorable. All right, let's take a look. Oh, I love it. If you have a few little stray threads, you can just clip them away, but that looks pretty stinking cute, I would say. Okay, so with that being done, I'm going to go ahead and pop this out of the hoop. Let's go ahead and trim this baby up. So according to the directions, it tells us that we're going to square the block to 6.5 by 8.5 inches with the design vase against the inner bottom edge of the ruler. So here's my orange pop ruler, and I want to make sure that the design base is right along there. It's just riding right here. And let's see, if I just square this up a little bit, I'll be good. There we go, on all the sides. So that looks great. I'm also going to use an additional orange pop ruler just to give it a little bit more steadiness here. There we go. Whenever possible, I like to give my hand a little bit more surface area to be able to hold on to. And then all I have to do is trim this up. I'm going to make sure and put my rotary cutter in the extended channel here in the corner. And then just very carefully cut through. This is why a rotating mat can be so helpful when using orange pop rulers. And voila, our block is complete.